Well, good morning. This is going to be a video regarding the small to large machinery that I use. So I thought I'd just shed some light on how I go about mechanically with machinery to build my guitars. So let's get going. Okay, this first particular item here is a belt sander, disc sander combination. This particular machine is actually used quite a lot. They're not very expensive. You can find them at a variety of different hardware stores, and you can go online. But basically, it's a 6-inch disc, and you got also a 4-inch wide belt. I use this particular machine to sand the bone nuts when I cut and shape them for all my guitars. I use it to trim fret wire. I use it to sand small blocks that I may graft onto a headstock. I use it to sand the sides of my fingerboards as I shape and get them ready to be glued onto a maple back. I use it to sand metal. If I make a metal cover plate for the back of a guitar, if I have to shape anything from wood, plastic, metal, I mean, this is a small machine to have. They're very good. The belts aren't that expensive, and the machine itself, it really pays for itself right away if you plan to get into building guitars. I've seen them on eBay. I've seen them on a variety of different sales networks around my area. I've seen them at swap meets, yard sales. So it's actually a really good machine to have. Like I say, it's a 6-inch disc sander along with a belt sander. As you can see, there's a little table there for the disc sander, which I always keep at a 90 degrees. It's very important that you do that. Good lubrication on these is always a good factor in keeping them running well and a little quieter. So great machine to have. So let's move on to the next one. This next machine is a valuable machine. Well, they're all valuable to me, but this one I use quite a bit for the radius sanding. As you can see, well, first of all, it's called a oscillating spindle sander. And what it does is that cylinder in the middle of the table that you see there, it's got a interchangeable sleeve and support behind the sleeve. They're usually made out of rubber, and but it rotates as well as moving up and down. So it gives you a really good sanding look, on any inside radiuses of Stratocasters and any of the curved type guitars. I use it for around the headstock area. Wherever you have a curved radius, this is the machine to have. The table on it isn't that big. You could probably build more of a table around it, but for me, this works really good. They are also not that expensive. I've seen them once again, yard sale, swap meets. You can go online and pick them up, and it's a great sander to use. And like I say, these cylinders here come in different diameters. Let me show you some of the sanding bits, or sanding cylinders and their sizes. So with these radiuses, you've got plenty of radius sanding ability, and I usually use about an 80 grit. And I forgot to mention on my other belt sander, Typically, most of the sandpaper types that I use are 80 grit. It does a good cut. It's not real rough, but then again, it's not real smooth. But it's just enough to get the shape that you need down. I don't know if you can see this, but inside the sleeve, there's a rubber spacer, and so they come in different diameters. You've got this diameter, this diameter, this diameter, and this diameter. And I don't think I used this particular one, but the spindle itself, this sleeve will fit right over it. So you can get pretty small. But like I say, this will cover pretty much all the radius sanding that you would need to do on guitar bodies, necks. I use it for, once again, I'll use it for metal. I use it for plastic if I make a custom pick guard. So it's a machine that's invaluable. I use it all the time. It's just great. So keep a lookout one. If you're ever at a swap meet, a yard sale, go online. It's called an oscillator spindle sander. Okay, on to the next piece of equipment. All right, the next piece of equipment is a drill press. This happens to be a floor model, and they come with a variety of different horsepower motors. Typically something like this would probably be quarter horse, half horse, 3/4 horse. They run on regular 110. All my machinery, pretty much, all the small stuff anyway, pretty much runs on regular socket 120 VAC. But this particular one here is a floor model. It's got an adjustable table on it that can move up and down based on the type of boring and drilling that I need to do. It's got 12 speeds on it, and I can take up to 3/8 of an inch, if not bigger, maybe even as much as 1/2 inch as far as the drill bit size goes. But typically when you get a larger drill bit size, the end of the drill bit is probably no larger than 1/4 inch or 3/8, so it fits really well into the chuck. I use this for so many applications. Okay, once again, wood, metal, plastic. I bore holes in the guitar bodies that I build. I bore tuner holes. Anything that needs the type of application where you rest the body on the table or neck or whatever object you're using, it'll pretty much do the job. Now, if you buy one used, like once again, swap meet, I would find something local because it is heavy, and if you got a pickup truck or a buddy's got a pickup truck, they can help you get it and deliver it to your house. If you ship something like this, it'll probably come taken apart, and it will be extremely heavy. They'll probably use a shipper. It's going to be expensive. So most of these tools, if you can get them local, it's cheaper. If there's shipping involved or freight, well, that's just an additional expense you'll have to deal with. But this particular drill press works quite well, and they have these also in benchtop models, which would be half the height of this particular machine. But drill press, this is called a drill press, multiple speeds, adjustable table. And you can see that table there is also a turntable. They have vices that will set on that table to hold particular objects. If you're drilling, let's say, a tremolo block, and you need something to stabilize the item you're drilling, well, you use a vise. I have one here that I can show you. Bear with me 1 second. Let me pull it out here. There we go. That type of a vise is very useful. It's heavy, and swap meets, most of these items I get at the swap meet, or I get them locally. So this tool here is is just one of the items that you're going to need. Actually, all the machines that I'm going to show you, they will be machines that if you want to get some decent guitars done, if you want to ease up your work, I can't tell you how many times I've had to drill by hand, but it works, but it's not as precise as a drill press, especially when you're boring out holes for, let's say, the Floyd Rose tremolo system, or any other holes of that nature. I mean, it's really, really important to have. This machine is a great asset. So let's move on to another one. The mighty bandsaw. Oh, this machine here, I think I have it going on every day. I can cut. It depends on what type of a blade that you put on it, the amount of teeth per inch, as well as the width of the blade. But this tool is great. I cut pickguard material. I cut inlay material. Now, it just depends. There's certain, you got to be careful, because the more coarse the blade that you use on this bandsaw, the rougher it'll cut. If you're going to do fine cuts, you want to get a fine tooth blade. This happens to be a 12-inch bandsaw, which means the throat here, from here to here, is 12 inches, which gives you plenty of room to, I've used this to cut out guitar bodies that are 1 3/4 inches thick. And as you can see, this is probably a body that I had cut. Look at how thick that is. You always want to make sure that this is adjusted properly. You never want too much slop on that blade when it's set up. The guard is important. And one thing about all these machines, you never want to force the material that you're going to be cutting or shaping. Let the blade, let the drill bit, let the sanding sleeves, let them do the cutting. You're basically guiding the material through. Now, I'm going to have to give a warning here. If you're going to be using any of this machinery, educate yourself. Read on them, learn how they work, learn about what type of power they need, what type of blades they need, how to maintain them. Learn as much as you can about the particular machine. I can't stress the value of studying as much as you can before you actually get into using these machines. If you run any of these cutters, borers, sanders, drillers, routers, shapers, I mean, you're doing so. I mean, it's at your own risk. Like I say, really examine situations before you actually get into the cutting. What I like to do is plan things out. So I've got markings on the wood that I'm going to cut, or the plastic I'm going to cut, or the metal I'm going to cut. And everything is a guideline to help you come out with the most satisfying and true cut that you can possibly do. They're very dangerous. A lot of these tools, if you're not focusing, you can bore a hole through your hand, you can sand your knuckle, or you can cut yourself horribly with a bandsaw. One of the things that I'll tell you, and like I say, you're running these machineries on your own at your own risk. Okay, here's a point. You never want to put your hands in a position where you can slip or move, and you end up cutting or hurting yourself. On this bandsaw, I never put my hand in line with that blade. So in other words, let's see, let me get a sample of wood here. In other words, if I'm going to cut this piece of wood, I'll never put my hand in this manner like this, because I could slip and I go forward and boom, I'm right into the blade. Now this isn't a tape about safety, but as I go along here, I'll give you some pointers. There may be some of these machines where I don't have the proper guards, but There's, I'm experienced with them. I've used them for years, but you got to be careful. You never want to get overconfident about using a piece of machinery because that's when you can get hurt. When you run a piece of machinery, you use it as if it can hurt you in a way, but don't get obsessed with it. In other words, focus. Think about what you're going to cut. If I'm going to cut a line here, I'm going to put one hand on this side, and I may put another hand on this side, and I guide it through. But I'll never do something where I put my hand like this and I guide it through because I'm right in line with that blade. So I always keep my hands a distance away from the blade, and the final cut will end and there's nothing in the way. In other words, my body that would get cut. So you really want to be careful. Wear your dust respirator, wear goggles to protect your eyes, and if you want to wear gloves, that's fine. Now here's a very, very important note. When you're operating a piece of machinery, like let's say you're cutting something here on this bandsaw, if somebody calls your name, never look away from the piece that you're cutting, especially when you're right in the middle of it. If somebody calls, "Hey, Karl," and I turn my head and I look away, I can move my hand like that just a little bit and I'll cut off the tip of my thumb. So if somebody calls your name when you're operating machinery, just pull back or stop, pull your hands away from the item that you're cutting if you can. You don't want it to be sitting there by itself. Hold it with one hand, turn off the machine with your other, continue looking at that blade, and when it shuts down completely, then you can look away and give your attention to the person who may be calling your name. Very important. So, like I say, study your safety procedures in running any one of these pieces of machinery. They are very dangerous. I've seen human error that's horrible. Tips of fingers cut off, holes being. I've had a couple of close calls, and let me tell you, it's scary. You only have 10 fingers, or you only have 2 hands with fingers, and you got a couple of thumbs there, and if you lose one of them, it's really going to kind of mess up your world. So, I'm not trying to make a joke about that, but seriously, you need to focus on your work. Okay, getting back to the machine itself. Okay, this is a 12-inch bandsaw. You can put different types of blades on it. There's a light that's right here. Mine happens to be burned out, but I'll put a focus lamp on it. I don't know if you can see one over here, but I'll put a focus lamp on it. I have my markings dark enough on the material I'm going to cut so I know where I'm going. And this particular model happens to be on a stand, and it's got a motor that's probably a half horse. But they make bandsaws in a variety of different sizes. Benchtop, there's some that are cast iron, completely stable in every way, and some are industrial. This one, this is basically a garage type home hobbyist bandsaw, and they call it a bandsaw sander. I think you can put a sanding wheel on, a sanding strap on it or something, but I've never used it for that. I only use it for cutting strap body blanks, tally body blanks, flying V body blanks, whatever I'm customizing or making. And so a very, very valuable instrument. I love it. I use it all the time. Moving on.